When they came and shot up the rooms at night, you wouldn't have bullets bouncing off, and it was cool.
Well, mining is a hazard, Kentucky, and if you ain't mining there, you're awful lucky, cause if you don't get silicosis or pay that's just atrocious, you'll be screaming for a union that will care.
There was sort of a very kind of practical, moral politics that had to do with a sincere feeling that people should be treated equally.
But if you want to get together and fight good, buddy, that's what I want to hear.
His political passion wasn't just out of emotion. I mean, Phil really knew his stuff.
His politics were on the left, that's very true, but he had a way of picking up all kinds of friends, people on the far left, and he had one or two friends that I would call right-wingers.
They were his political friends, and I didn't like any of them at all. I particularly disliked Jerry Rubin. In a way, my own conservative politics were created by Phil Ochs, or at least he pulled them out of me.
He was a liberal guy, but not in that kind of didactic, stupid, if you agree with me on 99 things but not one, you're not my friend anymore.
Phil was never cool, you know. Phil was right there. He exposed himself in a way that was ultimately lethal.
Folk singer Phil Ochs, former Ohio State undergraduate.
Taxi, you're under arrest.
I sold out this morning.
Those men at this point had to be totally euphoric. He's being taken seriously, coming up with song ideas faster than he can record them.
As the first troops land and step into the sand, the flags are waving. The Marines have landed on the shores of Santo Domingo.
His name is Phil Ochs, and he records on Elektra Records.
What we were looking for was more and different material. I wanted a steady flow of topical song and commentary, and all you had to do to get source material was open up the New York Times every day.
Sailing over to Vietnam, Southeast Asian Birmingham. Well, training is the word we use, nice word to have in case we lose.
I was writing songs about Vietnam, 1962 and 63, even when Kennedy was still around.
To keep Vietnam free for good old democracy.
When things like Vietnam go on, it just reacts inside of me. I get so repelled by certain things, or they strike me as funny or weird or strange, and my response comes out in the form of a song.
And 15,000 American troops, give or take a few thousand American troops.
Phil had what was essential: a stance, 6 strings, and an insistent voice wanting to be heard.
It's the sound of freedom calling, ringing up to the skies. It's the sound of the old ways of falling. You can't hear it if you try.
His songs never struck me as like commercial pop, but he was predicting such great things for this record. He said, "I'll be willing to bet you anything this is going to sell 1 million copies." It wasn't even recorded.
You can't hear it if you try.
Newport Folk Festival was coming up, and that was a huge, thing for Phil and for everybody involved.
I don't want to deny the next singer at least his 2 songs. And you'll wish when you heard him that there's a lot more time for him too. It's Phil Ochs.
Well, I think whenever there's a deep tragedy, there's also present something of the ridiculous, which is also true about integration. So I'm sure you'll remember a little town called Birmingham. So I'd like to do you a song now called Talking Birmingham Jam. Walking down to Birmingham, way down south in Dixieland, I thought that I would stop a while, take a vacation southern style. Got some southern hospitality down there in a southern hospital. Well, I've seen travel in many ways. I've traveled in cars and old subways. But in Birmingham, some people chose to fly down the street from a fire hose. Doing some hard traveling from hydrants aplenty.
That Newport was when the singer-songwriters came into their own. Sis Cunningham called all the new singer-songwriters Woody's children. You know, that was sort of the first really public crowning of the King of Folk.
The smell of blood was in the air, the challenge was laid down.
Phil said, you know, I went to New York to become the best songwriter in the country, and then I met Dylan, and I decided I'd be the second best.
I don't remember the competitiveness between Phil and Dylan. I'm sure it was there on some level, but they really got along. They had some real, ways that they clicked, and they could just go on and on and on together.
He idolized Dylan, and he wanted any acknowledgement from Bob, that even existed.
Dylan refused to ever give him his due.
Dylan despises what I write. I've talked to him at some length about this. He can't accept what I'm doing because it's political and to his mind it's therefore bullshit because I'm not writing about myself and my deepest emotions he feels. In other words, he thinks that I couldn't be much more honest with myself.
Oh, I'm just a student, sir, and only want to learn.
Phil was so vulnerable to him, but Dylan would play with him, the way a cruel person might when you know that you have the full affection of someone else and you toy with it. And that went on over and over with Phil and Dylan, and it was a very big part of Phil's pathology, as it were, I believe.
Here's the man I most respect in the world, Dylan, telling me this. And yet it's been a help to me in a sense, because it's made me question, what are my reasons for writing these songs? Am I a complete phony like Dylan thinks? Is that true?
The big falling out with Dylan was over. Can you please go out your window? Dylan said, what do you think? And Phil said, it's shit. And Dylan stopped the car, didn't he, in the snow, and said, Phil, get out.
He was such a prick.
Phil's very tough, grainy songs like Santo Domingo, Love Me, I'm a Liberal, Here's the State of Mississippi, were far more political than the much more, and tough-minded, than the much more generalized, accessible Blowing in the Wind. There was a difference between people who liked Bob Dylan. Anyone could like Bob Dylan. Everybody did. And those who even knew about Phil Ochs.
To ask a question like, do you really believe in these songs, it's like a put down as far as I'm concerned.
How do you react to statements like this? Don't be so negative.
Well, I punch him in the mouth.